Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we're here today to take a look at the closed beta for The Crew, which of course is the next great open world driving game coming from Ubisoft and Ivory Tower. A while back when The Crew was originally revealed, I was pretty freaking stoked because it seemed like it was going to be this awesome open world arcade style racing experience that I'd be able to enjoy with all of my friends, not just the ones who only play hardcore racing games. It was like, yes, this is something we can all play. Doesn't matter really the skill level, we can have a good time just messing about in this massive recreation of the United States. And of course that is one of the key features that the Crew offers, is this really ridiculously large recreation of the United States, and it's sort of spotted with really key locations. So you have like Detroit, New York City, and the West Coast, and of course if you want to though, you can drive all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. Will that be the most entertaining thing? I guess it's really up for you to decide. It's not like there aren't activities sort of sprinkled along the way, but currently in the closed beta there is a lot of empty space that doesn't really seem to have much going on. Hopefully that will fill in as we get closer to the game's final release. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is that while the footage you're seeing here is of the game on PC, it is currently locked at 30 FPS. However, Ubisoft has confirmed that they are aiming for 60 FPS on the PC and 30 FPS on consoles. Now, I would like to see 60 FPS on consoles. I guess that's not going to happen. Kind of sad. I don't really see there's any reason that they shouldn't be able to make that happen. While it is a really nice looking game, I do think it is very visually pleasing. There's some nice effects going on, and it is a really big open world. I don't see any reason that they shouldn't be able to hit 60 FPS on the next generation consoles. However, it is also very relieving to hear that the PC version isn't going to be locked at 30 FPS like the beta currently is, because that is just absolutely ridiculous. It would make absolutely zero sense because it's a PC and you just don't do that kind of thing. Luckily, that's been cleared up by Ubisoft, and hopefully that remains the case as we move up to the launch and they don't sort of lie to us, which would be bad. But what are my thoughts on The Crew? So I've actually got to spend quite a bit of time with it over the last couple days. The closed beta is currently still happening up until Friday. I also got to play a little bit of the previous closed beta thanks to a friend who loaned me his Uplay account. So I've had quite a bit of time to spend with The Crew, and pretty much at the end of the day, the one thing that I walk away with from The Crew is saying to myself that I'm slightly disappointed in a few ways, and I hope that certain things change as we move into the final release and the beta really helps iron out some of the small issues I have. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that no matter what happens with The Crew, it will still be a lot of fun to play with a group of friends. And I think that's really what Ubisoft and Ivory Tower were initially aiming for when they launched the game to us, was that this is going to be something that you're going to want to play with other people. This massive open world, this playground that you can just wreak havoc in, on-road, off-road, hypercar, supercar, streetcar, pickup truck with crazy modified tires, or maybe you want a GTR with freaking off-road tires that you use in a dirt race. Whatever you want to do, this game's going to allow you to do that. And we're going to put a ton of detail into this really crazy looking modification system that is more show than anything else, but looks really cool. And we're going to make these some of the key focuses of our game, and then we're going to give it to players and say, go have a good time. And I think that aspect of the game still remains. However, there are a lot of things that I find questionable after spending some time with the closed beta. The biggest one for me was being that the handling for the vehicles felt all over the place. I would hop in something like my very first car that I'm given in the game, the 370Z, which just is a sports car. It's it's a Japanese domestic model. It should feel pretty planned, and it should be a pretty nice little car. Yet it feels very sloppy. It's not really precise in terms of the controls. I'm using an Xbox One controller. I tried with the 360 controller. Those are really your two main options when it comes to gamepads for a game like this on the PC, and they both didn't really feel up to par. I feel like there's a lot of tweaking and tuning that needs to be done with the controls until the cars can actually feel like their own thing. Right now, it just all felt very sloppy. There was a lot of play in the joystick. There was a lot of delay, actually, between when I moved the joystick and when the car actually reacted, which is no good for a racing game, especially one that often requires you to be navigating through traffic at extremely high speeds, and even some missions that required me to actually, deliver a car in as best condition as I possibly can. So if I actually damaged the thing, I would lose points, or perhaps if I damaged it too much, I would fail the mission. And having controls that you're sort of fighting against makes that kind of thing frustrating and not enjoyable. And again, it was really weird because it went from car to car. I found that sometimes the off-road cars, which had me sliding a bit around, it was a little bit less noticeable. I think that just has to do with the fact that reaction timing isn't really as necessary when blasting through the hillside with nothing but trees to hit, compared to, being on the streets trying to dodge pedestrians and cars in your $500,000 Aston Martin that you're trying to get as little scratches on as possibly while you make a delivery. So hopefully that's something that sees improvement. I've seen talk of it on the forum, so there's definitely feedback going on towards the developers about it, and hopefully they recognize that and we can see the controls become just a little bit tighter. I think there's that really hard line you have to draw in between arcade and in simulation when you start making games like this, but I think there's a lot of empty space actually in between that line where you can make the controls that make sense, that can still be fun, that can still be arcadey, and hopefully, again, we'll see Ubisoft and Ivory Tower do something with that as we get closer to launch, because right now, it just wasn't satisfactory. You might get used to it, but when I think about actually playing this game, maybe for, hours a day with my friends on the weekend or whatever, it would definitely be something that was detrimental, that was a negative impact on the overall experience, so time will tell on that one. Now, the other thing I want to talk about was the integration of the story / single player type elements into the Crew. Initially, when they announced the Crew, I had no idea they planned on doing any sort of story or single player. I just thought, okay, it's a multiplayer focused game. You make your own crews, and then you take them online and you play with other people, or perhaps you just play against the AI, with a group of friends cooperatively. But it turns out the Crew actually does have its own story component, and this is where things start to get a little bit confusing, a little bit of wacky wasteland for me. And that is the fact that once you realize that every single player is playing the same story, you come to the conclusion that everyone is technically the exact same person. They're all actually the same character in the same situation inside of the same story. But on the other side of things, we're in our own open world participating with all these other players. So there's actually like hundreds of thousands possibly of the exact same person being played by people in real life inside of this game, and it's really confusing and strange. And I don't understand the design decision behind that. Why not make the game have its own sort of separate single player component, and then have your online profile, which actually allows you to maybe, make a character, have some sort of a representation of yourself online, whether it be male or female, rather than this, sort of just copy paste of everyone is this character. And then it gets even stranger when you actually can do some of these story type missions online cooperatively with your friends, so you're all the same person doing the same mission, striving towards the same goal, but there's you get what I'm saying at this point. It's confusing. I can't quite say I understand it, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, is it really going to detract from the actual gameplay experience, the driving? No, it really will have no effect on that. But I think when you're trying to craft any game or any experience, you need to look at it as a whole, and to me that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't click. The story, however, a lot of people are probably going to have their own way about it. Of course, I haven't actually experienced all of it, so I can't really say too much about it. What I can say is the initial story is nothing original. However, it's still a story. I guess it's nice to try and throw that sort of element into a racing game like The Crew, which is also like this open world title. I like how there's different characters and they all have their own sort of agenda. You'll meet Troy, who's kind of trying to take over Detroit as one of the members of the 5110s, which is like the main car club or main gang in the game, I guess, that you'll actually run into NPC wise. I like that. It's cool. At times, the NPCs can become a little aggravating. They seem to talk to you way too much. They seem to be really demanding in their orders, and it was one of those things where you can tell they're trying to integrate more of the single player into your open world experience, but it actually becomes quite a bit of a nuisance. So I hope they tone it back a little bit on the final release of the game, because it was just super annoying. There was one other thing that the game liked to do in the middle of races. I'd be having a really great time, actually enjoying myself, like I'm in a GTR with dirt tires and I'm racing on this dirt track. This is cool, this is a nice bit of variety. But then at the start of the race, there'd be like a cutscene. So every single race you seem to participate in actually has this really fancy, flashy cutscene that then leads into you actually driving the car. And I found that as a weird way to start races, but I can kind of see what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a more cinematic experience. And again, they're trying to integrate elements of this story at every given moment, every opportunity they have, into your multiplayer open world experience. So I get what they're going with that, but to me, I think it's a little bit overdone. I think it's going to start to wear on some people very quickly. I know it started to wear on me. Every time I went to a race, it was just like, cutscene, cars drifting around a corner. What is going on? Oh, I'm in this car. Okay. It was just a little bit much. Just a little bit much. But when you actually start to talk about what the Crew has to offer, The one thing it has, like, you know, tenfold is content. Tons of content, and obviously a really massive world to explore. Again, I think that the decision on whether or not that content is going to be entertaining for a long period of time, and whether or not this massive recreation of the United States is actually going to be a really fun place to be, is something that is going to require much more time spent with the game after launch to actually decide. But my initial opinions are, while none of the missions and like skills and things that I saw really stood out, it's nothing I haven't seen done in games before, they were still very fun. And I like the variety of racing on street, racing off-road, the idea that I'm going to be able to modify my cars with like crazy off-road tires and, you know, turn my 370Z into like a rally fighter if I want to. That's cool. That's a nice change for me, as someone who plays a lot of racing games, to have this ability to do all of these different, you know, sort of, what do you want to call it? All these different aspects of racing and all of these different terrains, all in any way that I want to, you know, just all on the fly in an open world, no restrictions, no like, oh, you have to do this to go race off-road. No, I can, you know, I can race off-road whenever I want. I can go wherever I want. I can do whenever I want, and I can do it however I want. And that's a nice piece of freedom that I really enjoy. The other thing that I really had a good time with inside of the Crew was the exploration, was actually just going places. There's these sort of satellite uplink towers that are all linked to this encrypted network, or so the person in the story tells me, that allow you to actually expand and gain access to skill missions and smaller type, you know, race events throughout the world by actually activating these radio towers. Then they sort of clear out a fog of war, so to speak, that allows you to gain access to these different events. So I thought that was really fun. I like just sort of bombing up a dirt road to the top of a mountain just to get my way to this sort of satellite array, and then open up a large portion of the map that was filled with more skill challenges. Of course, the game is going for a ton of customization, so you have all the vehicle customization that you'd expect. As you perform races and skill challenges, you'll unlock new parts that you can then put towards your car. You'll unlock different specifications for each of the various cars. So you might have something like the 370Z that I started off with, but it'll have different specs you'll be able to upgrade it to. So you'll be able to put it into like a super street or an off-road version or like a hypercar version. And of course, the car will have different handling depending on what specification you get it into. And of course, you'll be able to access different races depending on what specification you put it into. And at any given time, you can of course buy other cars once you earn money. You can, you know, modify those cars as you see fit. So there's a lot of customization going on here. I think that's definitely something people are going to enjoy. You can, you know, put decals on the car, all that crazy stuff to make your car stand out from other members of your crew, and of course stand out online when playing against other crews. So the game has content, you know, tons and tons of content. It's definitely not lacking in that department, and I've had a good time with the beta. I can't really say too much negative about it. I really hope the control systems get a little bit more refined, but to me, the Crew is definitely going to be a lot of fun to play with other people. That's one thing that I haven't really had the opportunity to experience, but, you know, just the idea of being in this open world, racing around with your friends, I mean, you know, how does that sound like anything but fun? So I guess we'll have to wait and see. You know, the game is still quite a bit of a ways off. Hopefully more and more of these beta events will help polish the game further. It was obvious that Ubisoft and Ivory Tower thought they needed, you know, help from the community to sort of refine the final stages of the Crew, and I'm glad that they decided to do these betas. I'm glad that they're taking a look at all this feedback being posted on the forums, and hopefully it just helps make the Crew a better game come launch. If you guys have been checking out the Crew in its closed beta form, or if you're just very interested in the game, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one.